Hello there. Today we're going to do something different. We're going to do some Star Wars ASMR, some soft-spoken facts, and I'll show you some Topps cards that I collected, Star Wars trading cards. I know what you're thinking. This guy has never done this before. This is not his usual content. He has no idea what he's doing. You're not wrong. I don't know what I'm doing. I just figured I've been watching ASMR for years. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars. I try to find Star Wars ASMR videos, and there's a lot of really great ones out there. But I thought for the longest time, why not make my own? And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, just haven't really put my foot down and done it. And I wanted to see what the interest in these sort of videos are. As someone who deals with a lot of stress and anxiety, I find that they help me calm down and also go to sleep. And it's only made better when it's about something you love. So Star Wars ASMR, I see it as relaxation with passionate interest. So that's kind of the goal of what this video is going to be. And we're just going to open it up with some Star Wars facts. So we're going to start out just listing random Star Wars facts. First fact. Weequay pirates were often hired as bodyguards by the Hutts due to their species' tough hides, which were naturally resistant to blaster fire. While their skin provided some extra protection, they were not invulnerable. I've got a bunch of different Star Wars facts that I've accumulated over the years from various different reference books and source books and novels that I've read. So I've got a whole list of just random, obscure Star Wars facts. A lot of these I've turned into videos that I've been posting to TikTok for the last couple of years. And it's one of my favorite things to do is just learn something new, something random, something insignificant to some, but really meaningful to others. And it could just be some silly, goofy little random fact about Star Wars, this galaxy far away, this fantasy space opera. And I always think it's really cool to learn something new and to share that with other people. So, fact number 2. After Kenobi defeated Maul on Tatooine, he had honored him by burning his body on a funeral pyre similar to that of the Jedi. I think, spoiler warning, I'm sorry, but spoiler warning for Star Wars Rebels, the final duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul I think is really underappreciated. I think now it's definitely become more appreciated than it had been, but I know it was met with some backlash when it initially released, and I myself was included in that. I think having these two characters who have been arch enemies almost, or at the very least rivals for decades, to see it come to such a swift conclusion with a really quick duel. First glance, it's a bit of anticlimactic, but that really isn't the case. I think a lot of depth went into that duel, a lot of thought, and how they mimicked each other from previous duels. Obi-Wan taking on the stance of his master, who previously defeated in the Phantom Menace, and luring him into that trap because Darth Maul just refused to learn from his mistakes and continued to be blinded by his rage and his arrogance. Whereas Obi-Wan just, over the years, had really honed in his skills and learned how to regulate just different feelings of emotion. And Obi-Wan, I think, is one of the most admirable Jedi. He's certainly one of my favorites. And to see just how calmly he was able to dispatch Maul in that moment, I thought it was really good. And the impact that they've each had on each other's lives, I think the way that their story came to a conclusion was really well done, in my opinion. Moving on to fact number 3. Wayseekers were Jedi that had declared themselves independent from the dictates of the Jedi Council, forging their own spiritual path to strengthen their connection with the Force. This concept was first introduced in the Star Wars High Republic books. I'm personally a really big fan of the High Republic novels. I've read most of them. I have started to fall behind. I've had a hard time reading recently. In the last year or so, I've had some neurological issues where my just frequent headaches and vision issues. And so I haven't been reading quite as much as I used to, but I have been a fan of the High Republic books. I initially started reading with the first one, Light of the Jedi, when that novel first released, and went on to read pretty much the entirety of that Phase 1 set of adult novels and some of the young adult novels as well. And some really awesome characters have been introduced, and I just really love that era. Moving on to Star Wars fact number 4. Throughout the Clone Wars, Chewbacca had served as a combat engineer and had worked on all kinds of equipment from weaponry to vehicles. Some of these facts are just pulled from some older Star Wars source books. Some of them come from some of the novels that I've read. And I believe that one came from the Star Wars Ultimate Visual Dictionary. I'm not quite sure if that's the right name. They keep updating all those books, but it was one of the source books that fact came from. Oxygen is poisonous to the Keldor species. That's the same species as Plo Koon. And this is why Plo Koon, who is a member of the species, is always wearing a face mask and goggles. They protect him from the oxygen-based atmospheres of most inhabited planets. And that was Star Wars fact number 5. Moving on, the Droideka can reach speeds of up to 47 miles per hour when chasing down a target in its wheeled form. I love the Droidekas. I remember playing LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, having to do the double jump and ground slam with the lightsaber to take out their shield. Memories like that never get old. It's always fun to remember. But they were a pain, the Droidekas. Moving on to our next Star Wars fact. I don't think I'm going to number them. I think I'm just going to keep going with just Star Wars facts, and we'll just move along like that. But some of the tallest buildings on Coruscant had reached heights of around 3.7 miles tall into the air. It was said that Sarlaccs are capable of absorbing the intellect of the victims that they consume. So the victims almost in part become a part of the Sarlacc. Next Star Wars fact, the standard Imperial-class Star Destroyer was capable of holding over 40,000 passengers and crew. One of my favorite things is the Star Wars vehicles, ships and starships. In the past, I've done videos breaking down the different size comparisons of like different capital ships between the Empire and the Rebel Alliance. Real rudimentary stuff. There's some really impressive channels here on YouTube and other platforms as well that go really in depth with animated models of these ships going toe to toe together. I think I'd shout out Eckhart's Ladder, who has some really incredible ships, videos with lore and the different, I'm not even quite sure what the right word is, but some really incredible videos breaking down the ships of the Star Wars universe and like up against each other. All the word I'm thinking of, but I can't quite put it to, well, anyway, we'll move on, but yes, great videos there. Next Star Wars fact. Max Rebo had agreed on behalf of his band to perform at Jabba's palace in exchange for nothing but free meals and no other form of compensation. Max Rebo. Gotta love Max Rebo, one of my favorite. The Blue Ortolan. For those who don't know, we're going off the cuff here, but Max Rebo is a member of the Ortolan species. He's a Blue Ortolan, and that instrument that we see him playing is known as the Red Ball Organ. There is a hot debate among, well, not quite one of the hottest debates in the Star Wars fandom, but certainly a question, which is, does Max Rebo play his organ with his feet or his hands? Now, this gets a little bit tricky because the correct answer, the model, the puppet itself, was just feet. Max Rebo has no arms. He just plays that organ with his feet. Then we look at the Lego figures and the Funko Pops, and they're all shown with him having both 2 feet and 2 hands, and that's has always technically not been accurate. There has been some comics where we've seen him with both 2 hands and 2 feet, but there's also been some media in Star Wars that just show them with 2 feet and nothing else. So does Max Rebo have hands? Who knows? Because we also have the new upcoming Star Wars show, The Skeleton Crew, that appears to have in its cast, which is predominantly children, but we see a blue alien similar to that of Max Rebo that could potentially be another Ortolan. There's a little bit of some difference there, I think, in the facial features. And then also, of course, the blaring fact that there is present 2 feet and 2 hands. So is it an Ortolan? If so, does that mean that Max Rebo does have 2 hands and 2 feet? Or is Max Rebo just a mutant? Who knows? But I believe the correct anatomically accurate description for the Ortolans is that they do not have hands, they do not have they do not have arms, they just have legs and feet, and that is what Max Rebo used to play his Red Ball organ. But who knows, that could change potentially in the future. Nice long Max Rebo rant there. Moving on to another Star Wars fact. In both Rogue One and Solo: A Star Wars Story, we see these humanoids who appear to be missing the upper half of their heads, and they are known as the Decraniated, and are the result of a gruesome surgery performed by the criminal Dr. Evazan. I'll put a picture of these guys up on the screen too, since you can't quite see them just by me speaking. But Dr. Evazan, of course, is the same character that we see in the first Star Wars film, A New Hope, who says, "I don't like you either," to Luke Skywalker in Mos Eisley Cantina. Moving on to our next Star Wars fact. Immediately after his activation, IG-88 and his fellow assassin droids had murdered their creators. This innate desire to kill had led IG-88 to become one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy. It's a bit of a dark fact there. I'm just reading off of what I got. Which of course are, these facts are things that I've personally written down. Like I had said, over the course of a couple of years, I've been posting Star Wars content to the internet, I guess, primarily on TikTok for the last, it's 2024, 4 years. It's pretty fun. I gotta say, there's ups and downs, but I do love talking about Star Wars, and if there's people out there that want to listen, means I'll continue to talk. Thank you to anybody out there that is watching and listening. I do appreciate it. We're going to get our next Star Wars fact here, which is that the beds in Coruscant hotels were excessively large to the average human, as they were made to be suitable for even the largest of visiting alien species. I think it's like that I find really interesting, the really small, minuscule details that who thinks of that sort of thing, and then it just into the lore of everything. I just find that stuff really interesting. Our next Star Wars fact is a Force ability. Force psychometry was a rare ability that allowed individuals to learn about the history of people or events by touching objects associated with them. Rey, Cal Kestis, Quinlan Vos, and another character named Carr were all examples of Force wielders capable of this power. 10 years before the beginning of the Clone Wars, Jedi Master Sifo Dyas had received a vision of the galaxy at war. It was this vision that drove him to order the creation of the clone army, unbeknownst to the Republic or Jedi Order. However, Palpatine and Dooku had learned of this creation and had the Jedi killed while taking secret control of the clone's development. So this one I think is something that is not quite entirely accurate, because I do know that, having read the Darth Plagueis novel, having read some of the canon Dooku novels, Dooku Jedi Lost, and I believe there's another canon novel that's out there that kind of delves this. There's a lot of different background stories that kind of, as far as what led to Sifo Dyas, have the clone army. There was a lot of manipulation behind some of his motives, and at the end of the day, it was his own decision to do so, but what had led to that motivation, what sparked that fear? There's a couple of different stories, and I am drawing a blank at the moment as far as which is canon, which is legends, because I have read a couple of different iterations of the Sifo Dyas tragedy. It's a little bit different in every story that you read. Moving on, our next Star Wars fact. The U-Wing, or the UT-60D Starfighter, had never received a full production run, but Senator Bail Organa saw to it that the few that had been created were marked as lost in transit within Senate records, while arranging for them to be found by the Alliance. I think the U-Wing is probably one of my favorite starship designs, starfighter designs. It's certainly one of my favorites of the newer ones that have come out in the Disney era of Star Wars. And that's a question that I get a lot, pretty frequently. Am I a fan of the Disney era of Star Wars? And I would say overwhelmingly yes. Not that I agree with everything, not that I think everything that's gone, green has been perfect. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. I think certainly there are things that I would have liked to have seen happen a little bit differently. I think the biggest thing for a lot of us is the lack of a reunion between the core cast with Luke, Han, Leia, Lando. Not getting a scene of all of them together, I think, was the biggest missed opportunity. But largely, I am a really big fan of a lot of what Disney has put out, and I like to think of it this way. Without Disney, we wouldn't have gotten half the stories that we've gotten in the last 10 years. And had the studio Lucasfilm gone to any other major company. I think, Universal, Warner Brothers, Sony, I look at the state of where a lot of their franchises and films are. Some of them have some pretty successful ones, but I look at the state of the DC superhero universe over the last couple of years now, going in a different direction. But imagine the leadership behind that being in the helm of Star Wars. And or you had Sony with they started to find their success with the Spider-Verse films, I think. But I think a lot of these studios don't really have, I think, the capacity to handle the Star Wars franchise with the care that it deserves. And I know that there's arguments out there that say that Disney that would also not have that capacity. And I'm not saying that those concerns are wrong, but I do feel that Star Wars being with Disney is the best fit. And I do think that there's been a lot of really positive outcomes that have come from that decision to hand over the reins to Disney. And I personally am a big fan of a lot of what they've done, while recognizing that there's been a decent bit of flaws as well. If you were to ask me, I think Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is probably one of the most controversial films, but me personally, I absolutely adore it. I love it. I don't think that it's perfect again. I think Admiral Ackbar certainly deserved a better fate. I would have liked to have had Luke stick around a little bit longer and see more of his heroics, but I think the way that they handled that character, while certainly hard watch at first, I think it's important that people see their heroes are also capable of failure and certainly capable of coming back from that failure. It's one of my favorite moments in the entire saga. My favorite moment, I would say, is between Luke and Yoda in that film. My two favorite characters, Yoda being number one and Luke being number two. The greatest teacher failure is. I think that's a really special moment, and it's always resonated with me, and it's stuck with me to this day. I think The Last Jedi is one of the most beautiful Star Wars films put to screen, and I think Episode 9, on the other hand, for me, was a fun watch. Certainly things and moments I enjoyed, but it didn't really culminate the saga in a meaningful way, I think, for myself. But certainly not that I dislike the film. I do enjoy it, but I recognize, I understand that I think Carrie Fisher's unfortunate and untimely passing really threw a fork in the road for production of Episode 9. Should have, postponed it, but they had that pandemic that came out, and would we have seen Star Wars Episode 9 before? Yeah, so there's a lot, I think, because had it not come out in 2019 when it did, I think it would have been a lot of will it go to streaming? Should it be held back until we can get this out into the theater? And then, so real world implications that I start to think about. But I think that there was a couple of smaller things, even given the circumstances, that could have improved it. But not a professional, so I just enjoy the film. But I think of all the Star Wars films that have come out recently, that one was probably the most lackluster for me. I happen to really enjoy Solo: A Star Wars Story. Rogue One is certainly one of my favorites. It has my favorite space battle, fleet battle in all of Star Wars, the Battle of Scarif with the MC-75, Admiral Raddus's personal flagship jumping out of hyperspace alongside the Nebulon B frigates and the CR-90 corvettes and all the Rebel fleet. You can spot the Ghost there. So I really love that film as well. I remember 2016 when that came out, I watched it 5 times in the movie theater. And Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, was the first Star Wars movie that I ever had the privilege and opportunity to see on the big screen. So that holds a pretty special place in my heart. I watched it with my cousins. Unfortunately, I did have it spoiled for me. I'll never forget. We were studying for a Spanish test in school, and then it was a Friday. There was the Thursday midnight screenings, and this one classmate of mine had seen it the night before and came in and made his... We were studying on Kahoot, so for those familiar, you can make your name whatever you want. And this person made their name Han Solo Dies, and the entire class saw it on a Friday. I, of course, was not able to go and watch on a school night. I made sure to get out opening night for every other film since that moment. I was devastated, but it was still a good movie, and his death certainly still resonated and impacted me, caught me off guard, even though I knew it was coming. Moving on to another Star Wars fact. Above the surface of Coruscant, there was a few floating artificially created parks that had housed forests, meadows, lakes, and even artificial mountains. One such platform was 2,000 square kilometers in size. Just imagine that, a floating lake or a meadow above the city skyline on Coruscant. I think that's pretty cool, trying to just even picture that. Dunium, was one of the toughest metals in the galaxy and was often utilized in the manufacture of warships due to its durability. Pod racing had actually been outlawed in the majority of Republic systems, but thrived in the Outer Rim territories on worlds like Tatooine and Malastare, where crime and gambling were always present. Sometime after the destruction of Alderaan, Nien Nunb had assisted Leia on a mission to help save Alderaanian refugees that were off-world when the Death Star destroyed their home planet. Nien Nunb's one of my favorite characters. He's a Sullustan pilot from the world Sullust, one of my favorite maps in the 2015 Star Wars Battlefront game, with the lava running down the hillsides and the landscape, kind of in a glow of red with the smoke pluming up from the ground. I really loved that 2015 iteration of Battlefront. I still play the 2017 version as well. I don't know why they ever cut support for that. And I was significantly bummed out that Nien Nunb did not make his return as a hero in 2017's Battlefront 2. We used to call him Pancake Face, because he was one of the heroes in 2015 Star Wars Battlefront, and he just like flaps skin on his face, and I don't know, Pancake Face kind of stuck. I'm not the only one that calls him that, but I love Nien Nunb. I was devastated too in Episode 9 when we found out that he was piloting Princess Leia's old consular ship, the Tantive 4, my personal favorite ship in all of Star Wars. Another CR-90 Corvette made its return in Episode 9, and Nien Nunb had the honor of piloting it to the Battle of Exegol, where Palpatine's lightning took him out, and I was very disheartened to hear that. Grand Admiral Thrawn had advised Emperor Palpatine against diverting the majority of the Empire's resources towards the construction of the Death Star, favoring the tactical value of a vast and more flexible naval fleet with the development of the TIE Defender. Grand Admiral Thrawn was also among the few Imperial admirals that had actively sought to minimize civilian casualties during battles. If you are unfamiliar with the Star Wars Thrawn novels in canon, also written by Timothy Zahn, the creator of Grand Admiral Thrawn, who had initially devised the character in Legends and came back to write him in several books in Star Wars canon under the Disney era. There is 2 trilogies, I believe. There's the Thrawn, which came out in 2015, and then Thrawn Alliances, which is a team-up of, I wouldn't say team-up, but it focuses on the relationship between Darth Vader and Grand Admiral Thrawn. I thought that was a really interesting novel. And then the third in that trilogy was Thrawn Treason. But there's also a prequel trilogy in canon with the character Thrawn, the Ascendancy, which is his home people, his home culture, and it follows a young Thrawn and his upbringing. I've not yet gotten to read those books myself, but I've heard that they're really good. Our next Star Wars fact: at the very center of the Star Wars galaxy was the Deep Core, a region which was considered highly hazardous for travelers as it contained a densely packed cluster of stars that circled an ancient black hole. During his exile on Dagobah, Yoda would often visit the Darkside Cave and be tormented by apparitions of the friends that he had failed. Yoda continued to visit the cave in order to confront his inner darkness and reconcile with his guilt and fears. As a matter of recompense for saving their home, some Ewoks had volunteered as emotional support beings to help comfort the injured rebellion veterans following the war. Admiral Ackbar, Nien Nunb, and Kaylin Emmett were among the very first people to join Leia in the formation of the Resistance. Among others, the initial recruits also included the likes of several New Republic pilots such as Snap Wexley and Elo Atsti. After the death of Coleman Trebor at the Battle of Geonosis, several Jedi Masters had temporarily served in his place on the Jedi High Council, with Obi-Wan Kenobi ultimately filling his vacancy. I know Coleman Trevor's a bit of a meme in the Star Wars community, the dinosaur Jedi Master who tried to take on Dooku in the arena battle on Geonosis, and then Jango Fett dispatches him fairly quickly. Ochi of Bestoon was given the Sith dagger by Sith cultists about 12 years prior to the events of The Force Awakens. His blood was used to inscribe the Sith runes that we see on the blade. Sith Wayfinders were essentially the predecessor to a Sith holocron. Both were utilized as data storage units. Wayfinders specifically stored coordinates, star charts, and the means for pilots to decode and travel along secretive networks and routes, whereas holocrons' data storage went beyond navigational records. Darth Maul would often practice his skills and abilities on hunts, once defeating 3 Rathtars using only a bladed staff as his weapon. Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar was constructed over a nexus of the dark side of the Force. Additionally, the design of the fortress itself, with its spires pointing upwards, was intended to fine-tune this dark energy. Kanan Jarrus, also known as Caleb Dume, was just 14 years old when Order 66 had happened. As time went on, he found himself working odd jobs in different star systems, never staying in any one spot too long. In this time, he'd refused to connect with the Force, believing it was no longer his friend. One of my favorite books was Star Wars: A New Dawn, which follows a young Kanan Jarrus and Hera Syndulla and how they first meet, the interactions that they have, and what leads them to joining together. It's a really, really good book. I think on that note, we're going to shift gears. I'm going to show you some Star Wars trading cards that I have. I have a Kanan Jarrus one that I think is really cool. But that'll be all for the Star Wars facts. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever done a ASMR video. I do feel a little bit uncomfortable doing so. It's not certainly something that has been in my comfort zone. It's something I've been waiting to do for a while, though. Let me know what I can improve on. I think lighting and camera, I'm certainly limited to what I have at the moment, so I'm not quite sure if what I've got is going to pick up with these cards with the camera, but I do want to show you. And one of my personal favorite, I think it's called triggers. I feel weird saying that, but for Star Wars ASMR videos or any video, is like tapping sounds. I just had to do that. It was a force of habit. So we're going to open this up. This is my binder that I've got of Star Wars cards. I'm going to try not to make too much noise. Alright, so first up, I know we did a lot of facts about this guy. We got Grand Admiral Thrawn in here. So I don't know if my camera's going to pick it up all that well, but we've got Grand Admiral Thrawn, one of my favorite characters. If we flip over to the side here, I've got Kanan Jarrus, which was what motivated me to open this up. So this is what it looks like. Now I've got two. This is the base, like the standard gray. And then this one is kind of like a fancy red holographic. I don't think it's actually holographic, but it's got some cool little feature to it with the swirls. I wish my camera would pick it up a little bit better. I know that I can get it to focus a little bit more, but I gotta get better at that. I'm sorry. I kind of feel funny just doing it. This is all very new to me, but maybe if I hold the... So what we have here, with these Star Wars Chrome Topps trading cards that they just started doing, they put like a little medallion in the top left of the card called Debut. It's like a rookie card. And I've got Baylan Skoll, which is right here. So we got Baylan Skoll, rookie card essentially. It's called his debut card. Jacen Syndulla. We got Shin Hati, Captain Enoch, Steel Pecker. Now these guys are pretty cool. If you're not familiar with the Steel Pecker, they're the character alien that we first see in The Force Awakens, pecking away at like some, metal debris on the dunes of Jakku. And they are capable of digesting metal resources of any kind, and that's why they're called steel peckers. I think it's pretty interesting. But I've got a number of Star Wars Topps trading cards. I think if we could open up a few, actually, if we go to this Baylan Skoll card, let's see if we could see it at all. So this is the debut thing that I was talking about, but if we flip it to the side, I'll read what we have. Baylan Skoll was a lightsaber-wielding mercenary for hire. Though not a Jedi, there was a time when Skoll knew the acclaimed Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. Skoll works in tandem with his apprentice, Shin Hati, serving Morgan Elsbeth and her hunt for Grand Admiral Thrawn. Moving on, I got a whole bunch of Mandalorians. We got Din Djarin, Jango Fett, Boba Fett, Paz Vizsla, the Armorer, Bo-Katan. Technically, the argument whether or not is Boba Fett a Mandalorian or not. It was kind of answered in the book of Boba Fett, or I believe it was The Mandalorian Season 2 that it was first answered. with Boba Fett's chain code that he pulls up of his father. The answer is he a Mandalorian? No, he doesn't identify as a Mandalorian. He does not abide by the creed. He does not abide by any part of their religion. He's just a simple man trying to make his way in the universe. Now, yes, there are different sects of the Mandalorians. Obviously, Bo-Katan is more than comfortable taking off her helmet, whereas Din Djarin and the armor, they're much more staunch religious zealots almost. So there's differences there in the culture that the Mandalorians have, but Boba Fett doesn't align himself with either of them. So it really just comes down to that. He is potentially the descendant of a Mandalorian. Was Jango Fett a Mandalorian? That story has changed over time as well between Legends and canon. But we do know that Jango Fett had fought in the Mandalorian Civil War, and he of course has Mandalorian armor, which he had passed down to his son. Or clone, unaltered clone. But so yeah, there's room for debate there. But Boba Fett himself does not refer to himself as a Mandalorian. Just a simple man. We got, I think, one of my favorite designs to come out of the Star Wars Mandalorian was these characters. The Praetorian Guards, of course, very reminiscent of the Royal Guards that we see for Palpatine in Return of the Jedi, and then we have the Praetorian Guards themselves made their first appearance in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and again, a film that I happen to really enjoy. And then we get this alternative take on these characters in The Mandalorian. Unfortunately, they took out one of our favorite characters there, but I think this design's really cool, and I like how the card's kind of catching like a rainbow there in the camera. Moving on, we got a pretty sick General Grievous card. I've actually got a couple of them here. Let's see if the character, there we go. So it's not picking up quite all the details that I would have liked to be seen on the camera here, but we'll just read some of this card here. It says, as the cybernetic general of the droid armies of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, General Grievous was one of the most important players in the battles of the Clone Wars. A feared Jedi hunter trained to kill them by Count Dooku himself, he collected the lightsabers of the Jedi that he had bested in battle. Unfortunately, he was no match for the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, fun fact, General Grievous, being the cyborg that he is, the only remaining organs, organic matter that he has left of his original body are his eyes, lungs, heart, and stomach. I believe those are the four things that he still has as a cyborg. The only organs that remain for General Grievous are his eyes, his heart, his lungs, and his stomach. And then the rest of his body is cybernetic. It's got to be a painful way to live, especially with that cough that he has. Let's move through some of these characters here. I know that a lot of my stuff hasn't been really featured on the screen in this video. It's more of a talking type thing. If you're anything like me, though, you just throw on these videos, drop the phone and try to go to sleep. So if I've done this right, that's ultimately the goal. Where my voice is agitating and it has no effect whatsoever except the opposite, which is not desirable. So hopefully that's not the case, but here's one of my favorite characters. My favorite, I think, excluding Boba Fett, excluding the Mandalorian, Cad Bane is one of my favorite characters of all time. For those that have been following me for a while, especially through 2022 when the Book of Boba Fett was coming out, you know that Cad Bane had me hyped. If you've been following me on some other platforms, I did a reaction to that episode where he first showed up. And I just love Cad Bane. He's got such a cool hat. I've been trying to find a hat like his for a while. It's like a bolero western, wide brim, flat brim hat. We got Cassian Andor, another cool character. Seeing if the camera can catch it. They're not really catching too well on the camera there, but cannot wait for Cassian Andor Season 2. The first season was just incredible. Some of the best Star Wars storytelling that I've ever seen. We got Darth Vader. If I could try and maybe it'll catch, I'm not sure. He's just a pretty standard card. I've opened a number of these boxes here, trying to get a signature. It's pretty rare. I'm not even sure if I can get him in this box or not, but this is the Star Wars Topps Chrome is where I got most of these cards from. We've got a Pit Droid, Jar Jar Binks, young Princess Leia, the fourth sister, Luthen from Andor, Berg, which is a Devaronian character played by Clancy Brown, who is, of course, the voice of many Star Wars characters and non-Star Wars characters alike. We got the voice of Mr. Krabs, but he's also Savage Opress in the Clone Wars and a number of other characters. Here we go. So we were talking about him earlier. We have Nien Nunb, everybody's favorite Sullustan character, everyone's favorite pilot. We got Nien Nunb. All right. Well, with that, I think I am I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to come up with some things. Okay, guys, I think that's where we're going to end it for today. Like I said, I'm fairly new to all this. It was something that I had been hoping to do for a while, as a fan of ASMR and as a fan of Star Wars, and having seen some incredible content that merged those two things together. I wanted to do that for myself for the longest time. I do feel a little bit odd actually doing it. And that's not to throw shade at anyone, any of the talented ASMR folks here in this space, but it is something that, I think that there was some hesitancy for me to do, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to be received, what the reception is like. I talk really fast sometimes, so if there's any feedback out there, I would greatly appreciate it. I think this is something that I'd like to make more of if the interest is out there. And if there's any certain types of videos that you'd like to see specific to Star Wars, definitely let me know. I think I plan to do a lot of collection-based videos. This was my first one, a bit of a test run. I think, certainly some improvements with the lighting and the camera and positioning of the things that I'm actually showing, like the cards and stuff like that. But more fact videos as well, I think, to come later down the line. But yeah, just let me know in the comments what you thought. This was just something I had hoped to create, something in the works for a while. And yeah, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for sticking around for watching. And maybe we'll have some more videos like this coming out again in the future. So stay tuned for more Star Wars facts, Star Wars collection showcase ASMR-esque videos. And thank you so much. May the Force be with you always.